Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on the locations where you are. On behalf of Cuts International, let me welcome all of you to this webinar on Shepreneurs and the kind of issues, challenges that they are facing. This is part of a project which we are implementing with support from the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office of the United Kingdom, which was earlier known as DFID. This project is the first phase is coming to an end in March this year. So we have come out with a number of outputs and we have also already achieved a few outcomes of this work. So this webinar is going to discuss one key message which has come out of this work, which is that among various challenges that women entrepreneurs are facing in our part of the world, doing this project in 4 countries, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, and Nepal, one major issue is asymmetric information. And as a result, the kind of various other barriers that women entrepreneurs are facing. So I'm not going to speak much on this matter. And I will now say a few words about the process which you are going to follow in this webinar. First is that though there is no particular order of speakers, but I would first request Anoush to speak. She is going to make a very brief presentation, just setting the tone, outlining what we intend to discuss today. Following that, I will request Jahnabi, and then Mia, and then finally Nandita. Now I have thought about few specific points which I'm going to ask you, knowing that you are in a position to respond to those points, very 1 or 2 points. But there are a couple of other things which I would like to flag. One is that all of you, you can pose your questions, clarifications, thoughts in the chat box, and we're going to direct them. It may not be possible to answer or respond all of them during this webinar, but definitely we're going to make note of them and act on them. Secondly, as part of this work, as I said, there is asymmetric information or lack of information in many cases. And one particular area where we found that we are lacking is that women entrepreneurs, they are not aware of trade procedures. So we have prepared 2 short videos with subtitles explaining trade procedures which are to be followed in order to take part in trading activities, cross-border trade activities. So with that, let me now hand it over to my colleague Veena Vidyadharan. She is leading this project. I would request her to speak a little bit about these videos and then play the videos. So once the videos are played, we are going to start the formal panel discussion with 4 of you as speakers. So over to you, Veena.
Thank you, Bipul. So good afternoon, good evening, everybody. So I would like to share that this video is the output of the study which we have undertaken in the project Gender Dimensions of Trade Facilitation with the support of Foreign Commonwealth Development Office. So we did conduct survey in the BBIN countries with women entrepreneurs, and we came to know that most of them are in the informal sector, or even the aspiring exporters are somewhat reluctant to enter into the export business owing to various reasons. One is, of course, lack of awareness, and the other is just hesitation because they're unable to bear the risk involved or to avoid the complexities in the tax formalities, registration, etc. So even while several government agencies are conducting training programs at various levels, we have seen that most of the time the trainings are organized at the district headquarter level, where the outreach is limited, and quite often the participants tend to be the same in all those workshops. So often people are not aware where to go, how to get the right information, what are the steps to be followed, where should they sell their product, etc., etc. So under this project, we thought that it's a good opportunity for us to come up with these animation videos, which simply mentions the procedures to be followed while registering the firm or while entering into the export business. What are the points that has to be kept in mind, where to get the right information, etc. And even this is just an animation video of 5 minutes duration each. So we have come up with 2 videos. The first one will talk about the procedures in establishing business, the process involved in registration and all. And the second one will elaborate on the procedures involved in export business. So this will be like a ready reckoner for them, which they can refer to whenever it is required, and it will be helpful for them. Because in one of our previous project, we came to know that we did organize a awareness generation meeting with few women, and out of the 25-30 participants, only 2 of them actually registered after attending the workshop. So that is the outcome we often see in these kind of workshops. So with this kind of videos, which are easily accessible, and we are also coming up with a WhatsApp version, which we'll be sharing with the network of the entrepreneurs whom we have interacted during this project. So this will be very helpful for them to enter into the business. With this, I would like to request Suptish to play the first animation video on establishing business.
अरे कैसी हो सीमा, कैसे आना हुआ?
मैं ठीक हूँ। रश्मि, सोशल मीडिया पर देखा था कि तुम एक्सपोर्ट बिजनेस कर रही हो। हमारा हैंडीक्राफ्ट का काम है ना, मैं भी हमारे हैंडीक्राफ्ट के आइटम विदेशों में बेचना चाहती हूँ। बस उसी के बारे में पूछना था।
हाँ बिल्कुल, जैसे कपड़े, जूते, खाने पीने की चीजें एक्सपोर्ट होती हैं, वैसे ही तुम हैंडीक्राफ्ट के आइटम एक्सपोर्ट कर सकती हो।
पर मैं शुरुआत कैसे करूँ?
तुम्हारे पास अपनी कंपनी का जीएसटी नंबर और पैन कार्ड तो होगा ही। अगर पहले से नहीं है तो वो लेना होगा। साथ ही बैंक में करंट अकाउंट यानी चालू खाता भी खुलवाना होगा। ऐसा खाता जिसमें विदेश में लेन देन की अनुमति हो। एक्सपोर्ट शुरू करने से पहले तुम्हें विभिन्न रजिस्ट्रेशन करवाने जरूरी हैं, जैसे कि आईईसी कोड, बिजनेस आइडेंटिफिकेशन नंबर यानी BIN, रजिस्ट्रेशन व मेंबरशिप सर्टिफिकेट यानी RCMC, ECGC का इंश्योरेंस और एक्सपोर्ट काउंसिल के इंस्पेक्शन सर्टिफिकेट्स।
क्या तुम मुझे इन सब के बारे में विस्तार से बता सकती हो?
हाँ बिल्कुल। सबसे पहले बात करते हैं IEC की। IEC का मतलब है इंपोर्ट एक्सपोर्ट कोड। इसके बिना कोई भी इंपोर्ट एक्सपोर्ट का काम नहीं कर सकता। IEC के लिए DGFT यानी डायरेक्टरेट जनरल ऑफ फॉरेन ट्रेड की वेबसाइट पर अप्लाई करना होता है। इसी तरह बिजनेस आइडेंटिफिकेशन नंबर यानी BIN भी DGFT की वेबसाइट से ही लेना होता है। इसके बाद बात आती है RCMC की। हैंडीक्राफ्ट्स के एक्सपोर्ट के लिए तुम्हें एक्सपोर्ट प्रमोशन काउंसिल फॉर हैंडीक्राफ्ट्स यानी EPCH से ये सर्टिफिकेट लेना होगा। इसी तरह अगर किसी को कपड़ों का एक्सपोर्ट करना हो तो अपैरल एक्सपोर्ट प्रमोशन काउंसिल से, ज्वेलरी के लिए जेम्स एंड ज्वेलरी एक्सपोर्ट प्रमोशन काउंसिल से सर्टिफिकेट लेना होता है। इन संस्थाओं की जानकारी भारत सरकार के उद्योग विभाग की वेबसाइट पर पहले ही मौजूद है। माल भेजने के बाद पेमेंट का कोई नुकसान ना हो, इसके लिए तुम एक्सपोर्ट क्रेडिट एंड गारंटी कॉर्पोरेशन ऑफ इंडिया यानी ECGC से इंश्योरेंस करवा सकती हो। ECGC.in वेबसाइट पर अनेक बीमा पॉलिसी दी गई हैं। तुम अपने बिजनेस और जरूरत के अनुसार पॉलिसी चुन सकती हो। तुम्हें एक्सपोर्ट काउंसिल ऑफ इंडिया की वेबसाइट eicindia.gov.in पर इंस्पेक्शन सर्टिफिकेट्स के लिए भी अप्लाई करना होगा।
हाँ समझ गई, पर मैं रजिस्ट्रेशन के बाद अपने हैंडीक्राफ्ट आइटम कहाँ और कैसे बेचूं?
तुम खरीदार तक कई तरीकों से पहुंच सकती हो, जैसे कि ट्रेड फेयर्स, बायर सेलर मीट, इंटरनेट पर ढूंढकर और बड़ी कंपनियों की बायर एजेंसी से संपर्क करके। तुम्हारे हैंडीक्राफ्ट आइटम अच्छे हैं, इस बारे में लोगों को बताना है तो तुम अपने माल के सैंपल भी दूसरे देशों में भेज सकती हो। पर तुम्हें प्रोडक्ट की कीमत इस तरह से निर्धारित करनी है जिससे तुम सारे खर्चे निकालकर प्रॉफिट मार्जिन निकाल सको।
लेकिन एक्सपोर्ट के काम में बहुत पूंजी की आवश्यकता होती है।
हाँ, एक्सपोर्ट बिजनेस की विभिन्न एक्टिविटीज के लिए तुम MSME डिपार्टमेंट से वित्तीय सहायता भी ले सकती हो।
कैसे?
ये सहायता 2 तरीके से मिलती है, कार्य या एक्टिविटी से पहले और उसके बाद में। जिस कार्य के लिए तुम्हें वित्तीय सहायता चाहिए उससे 1 महीने पहले DC MSME में अप्लाई करना होगा। इसमें ये डॉक्यूमेंट लगेंगे: रजिस्ट्रेशन सर्टिफिकेट, 2 लोगों के पासपोर्ट, ओनरशिप प्रूफ। इसी तरह अगर तुम्हें ये वित्तीय सहायता वो कार्य पूरा होने के बाद चाहिए तो उस कार्य के 1 महीने के अंदर क्लेम के लिए अप्लाई करना होता है। इसमें ये डॉक्यूमेंट लगेंगे: सभी बिल्स की डुप्लीकेट कॉपी, पासपोर्ट की फोटो कॉपी, ओरिजिनल फ्लाइट टिकट, ऑर्डर पूरा होने की फीडबैक रिपोर्ट। इन सब के अलावा सरकार ने वित्तीय सहायता के लिए कई अन्य योजनाएं भी निकाली हैं, जैसे महिला उद्योग निधि, स्त्री शक्ति पैकेज, ट्रेड। इस तरह पैसों की समस्या का भी समाधान हो गया। समझ गई ना?
हाँ बिल्कुल, मैं भी ये रजिस्ट्रेशन का काम करवाती हूँ और कोई दिक्कत रही तो तुम हो ही।
Thank you. So this was the first video which kind of details the steps to be followed while registering your business firm. So this is actually the primary step, and this is actually meant for those entrepreneurs who are willing to enter the export business. Now the second video will elaborate a little more on the procedures and documentation which is required while entering the business. Swiftish, can you play the second video?
सीमा, क्या हाल है?
आओ रश्मि, आज रास्ता कैसे भूल गई?
सोचा तुम्हारे हैंडीक्राफ्ट एक्सपोर्ट के काम का श्री गणेश हो गया होगा, तुम मिठाई खाने चली आई।
हाँ क्यों नहीं। वैसे रजिस्ट्रेशन तो हो गई रश्मि, कुछ खरीदारों ने हमारे प्रोडक्ट्स में इंटरेस्ट भी दिखाया है। मैं तुम्हें फोन ही करने वाली थी कि माल विदेश भेजने का क्या तरीका होता है।
देखो, सबसे पहले तो तुम्हें अपने प्रोडक्ट का एक प्रोफॉर्मा इनवॉइस यानी कि एक कच्चा बिल बनाकर अपने बायर को भेजना होगा। इस प्रोफॉर्मा इनवॉइस में लिखा होगा कि प्रोडक्ट कैसे भेजा जाएगा, बस से, फ्लाइट से या फिर जहाज से, बायर को कितने का पड़ेगा, पेमेंट का तरीका क्या रहेगा, पैक करने के लिए पैकेजिंग मटेरियल क्या होगा। इसके बाद तुम्हारा कस्टमर सब बातों से सहमत होने पर हैंडीक्राफ्ट आइटम्स का ऑर्डर कंफर्म कर देगा। ऑर्डर कंफर्म होने के बाद तुम्हें कमर्शियल इनवॉइस बनाना होगा। ये इनवॉइस एक सामान्य बिल की तरह ही होता है। अब बात आती है प्रोडक्ट को भेजने की, यानी शिपिंग की। प्रोडक्ट भेजने से पहले जरूरी है कि सामान की क्वालिटी ग्राहक से हुई डील के अनुसार हो, साथ ही तुम्हारा प्रोडक्ट उस देश के निर्धारित मानकों के अनुसार हो, जैसे ISO सर्टिफाइड या EFSA सर्टिफाइड। पैकिंग भी ग्राहक के दिए निर्देश अनुसार और उस देश के नियमों के अनुसार होनी चाहिए।
ओह, क्या प्रोडक्ट्स को पैक करने के भी नियम होते हैं?
हाँ, हर सामान को अलग अलग तरह से पैक किया जाता है ताकि टूट फूट या खराबी ना हो। पैक करने में अलग अलग मटेरियल काम लिया जाता है। खैर, तुम्हारा तो हैंडीक्राफ्ट का काम है, वरना पैकिंग पर शिपिंग के लिए आवश्यक निर्देश जरूर होने चाहिए कि आपका प्रोडक्ट जल्दी खराब होने वाला है, ज्वलनशील है, टूट फूट वाला है, जहरीला है या पर्यावरण के लिए नुकसानकारी है। प्रोडक्ट की लेबलिंग भी एकदम सही होनी चाहिए। प्रोडक्ट कब बना, कब पैक किया गया, अगर खाने पीने का आइटम है तो वेज या नॉन वेज, बनाने की सामग्री यानी इंग्रेडिएंट्स, बैच नंबर, एक्सपायरी डेट, ये सब। भारत सरकार के इंडियन इंस्टीट्यूट ऑफ पैकेजिंग में हर तरह की प्रोडक्ट को पैक करने के स्टैंडर्ड्स की पूरी ट्रेनिंग भी दी जाती है।
प्रोडक्ट पैक होने के बाद फिर डिलीवरी के लिए तुम्हें कस्टम एजेंट के पास जाना होगा और अपना एडी कोड बताना होगा। एडी कोड यानी ऑथराइज डीलर कोड। जिस बैंक में तुम्हारा चालू खाता है वो बैंक तुम्हें एडी कोड देगा। ये कोड प्रोडक्ट की शिपिंग के लिए बहुत जरूरी है। जब तुम कस्टम हाउस एजेंट के पास जाओगी तो तुम्हें ये एडी कोड, अपना प्रोफॉर्मा इनवॉइस, कमर्शियल इनवॉइस और सामान की पैकिंग लिस्ट देनी होगी। वो एजेंट तुम्हें एक सैंपल शिपिंग बिल दे देगा। ये एजेंट साथ के साथ ही तुम्हारे डॉक्यूमेंट्स कस्टम विभाग में अप्रूवल के लिए भेज देगा ताकि तुम्हारा प्रोडक्ट पोर्ट पर भेजा जा सके। तुम चाहो तो खुद भी icegate.gov.in वेबसाइट पर जाकर अपने डॉक्यूमेंट खुद कस्टम विभाग को भेज सकती हो। तुम्हारे डॉक्यूमेंट अप्रूव होने के बाद कस्टम विभाग तुम्हें एक पक्का शिपिंग बिल जारी कर देगा। कस्टम से इस बिल की 3 कॉपी जारी होंगी। एक कॉपी कस्टम खुद रखेगा, एक कॉपी एक्सपोर्टर को दे देगा, तीसरी कॉपी यानी ईपी कॉपी जहाज में सामान लोड के बाद तुम्हें दी जाएगी। एक्सपोर्ट से जुड़ी सरकार की विभिन्न स्कीम्स में ये कॉपी काम आएगी। अब कस्टम हाउस एजेंट प्रोडक्ट को शिप में लोड करवाएगा। प्रोडक्ट के शिप में लोड होने के बाद शिपमेंट टीम द्वारा एक लैंडिंग बिल जारी होता है। इसे लोडिंग बिल भी कहते हैं। इसमें शिपमेंट और सामान की ओनरशिप की पूरी जानकारी होती है। ये लैंडिंग बिल तुम्हारे लिए बहुत जरूरी है। तुम इसे अपने कस्टमर को भेजोगी ताकि प्रोडक्ट अपने देश में पहुंचने पर कस्टमर उन्हें क्लेम कर सके। और जहाज में मेरे प्रोडक्ट का कोई नुकसान हुआ तो?
कई मरीन कंपनियां प्रोडक्ट लोड करते समय आपके माल का इंश्योरेंस करती हैं, जबकि कई बार किसी बाहरी एजेंसी से इंश्योरेंस करवाना होता है। कस्टम हाउस एजेंट भी इस बारे में और जानकारी दे सकते हैं।
भाई प्रोडक्ट तो चला गया, पर पेमेंट की रिस्क रहेगी तो?
मैंने तुम्हें पहले बताया था ना, ECGC से पेमेंट रिस्क का इंश्योरेंस करवाने के लिए। इस इंश्योरेंस से तुम्हारी पेमेंट रिस्क तो पहले ही कम हो जाएगी।
और कस्टमर से पेमेंट कैसे आएगा?
तुम्हें प्रोडक्ट भेजने के 21 दिनों में इस पूरी प्रक्रिया के सारे डॉक्यूमेंट्स बैंक में जमा करवाने हैं, जैसे प्रोफॉर्मा व कमर्शियल इनवॉइस, पैकिंग लिस्ट, शिपिंग बिल, लैंडिंग बिल, इंस्पेक्शन सर्टिफिकेट। अगर कंट्री ऑफ ओरिजिन सर्टिफिकेट है तो वो भी जमा करवाना है।
बैंक इन डॉक्यूमेंट्स का क्या करेगा?
अरे भाई, बैंक ही यहाँ से विदेश में तुम्हारे कस्टमर के बैंक में पेमेंट रिक्वेस्ट भेजेगा। वहां से तुम्हारे बैंक में अपनी करेंसी में पेमेंट आ जाएगा और फिर सीमा बन जाएगी एक इंटरनेशनल एक्सपोर्टर। समझ गई?
बिल्कुल। इसी खुशी में ले मिठाई खा।
अरे वाह।
Thank you, Veena. Thank you, Suptis. Now, before we come to the panel discussion, as I said, I will first request Anoush to speak. I would like to mention 3 points, including responding to one of the points that Mia has already raised. First is that these videos we have prepared keeping India in mind, and I'm happy to share with you that our partners are preparing them for their respective countries, Bangladesh, Bhutan, and Nepal. So that will cover the whole sub-region. There are mostly the procedures are more or less same with differences in some places, some areas. There are nuances as well. So keeping those things in mind, we are our partners are doing those videos. Second is that you must have noticed in these videos we have shown, particularly the first one, a number of portals, and many of them are in English language, whereas that may be a barrier to have better access to them. So this is one realization that we have, and we are now going to advocate for that as much as possible these portals should also be in local languages, so that it will be easier for our entrepreneurs to access them. And number three, and that is something for which Mia has raised this point to me. What about small exporters? We have found that many of these entrepreneurs, particularly women entrepreneurs, their business is small and they have to spend a lot in transaction cost while adhering to these regulations. So now if I keep those regulations as they are, this proportionally this compared to the volume of their business, the transaction cost is so high, is very high. There comes the importance of business to business or business to consumers, e-commerce exports, and the role of platforms like Amazon uh, or any other such platform in facilitating that. And that is also gaining traction, gaining importance in in our country. And I'm happy to say that many small exporters, including women entrepreneurs, now availing such facilities in order to export their product at a less transaction cost. So on that note, with that, let me now request Anoush to make her presentation in about 10-12 minutes. Over to you, Anoush.
Thank you, Bipul. I'm very happy and honored to be participating in this event today.
Please, can you put her presentation on the screen?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Great. Thank you very much. My name is Anoush Boghossian, and I am driving the work on trade and gender in the World Trade Organization since 2016. And today I will talk about two issues of the two issues that will be presented in this panel. That is to say, why access to information is crucial for women entrepreneurs to participate in international trade. And under this item, I will talk about the evidence that the WTO has gathered regarding the knowledge gaps of women entrepreneurs on trade rules and the lack of capacity building programs dedicated to women entrepreneurs on trade rules again. Another aspect I will develop is that knowledge is really absolutely fundamental if we want to use trade as an empowering tool for women entrepreneurs. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. The second part of the presentation will focus on, how can we reduce the challenges? So in the WTO, I will present briefly the program that the WTO wants to launch this year, dedicated to women entrepreneurs. It's a very concrete program which is in line with women entrepreneurs' needs, but I will talk to you about it in a few minutes. And I will also talk about other solutions, namely solutions in relations with how to integrate the gender issue in trade policies when they are being done by governments. So for the first part of the presentation, could you please go to the next slide? Thank you. So the idea of why access is so important. And in the WTO, in the last 2 years, we have gathered evidence that women entrepreneurs lack knowledge on trade rules. So first of all, I will sort of look at how women entrepreneurs are actually not integrated in international trade. So globally, you have figures from the International Trade Center that tells us that only 15% of business women export. The surveys that we conducted, the evidence that we gathered in the last 2 years, in 3 regions, in East Africa, in South Asia, and in Latin America. So combined in all these 3 regions, only 27% of women entrepreneurs are exporting. And in South Asia, specifically, only 25% of women entrepreneurs are exporting. Actually, it's interesting to note that during these surveys that we did, we surveyed more than 800 women entrepreneurs in all the 3 regions. it's interesting to note that actually, when they answered the question, do you export, yes or no, some of them didn't really realize that they were exporting, especially in South Asia. Some said that they were supplying to international market, but reported that they were not exporting. So about 13% of them said that. And also 6% of women entrepreneurs surveyed in South Asia said that they were exporting, but reported that they were not supplying to international markets. So already there you can see that there is, the simple terms of trade are not really integrated into the minds of businesswomen. So in terms of additional evidence, we have discovered in those surveys that actually there is a general knowledge gap on trade rules and agreements faced by women entrepreneurs. So according to the surveys we did combined in all these three regions, 45% of women entrepreneurs have received no clear information on customs requirements and expressed difficulty in accessing information on international export, import, and including tariff. In South Asia, it's 34% that received no clear information on customs requirement, and 53% have difficulties in accessing information on international export, import, including tariffs. In the three regions combined, we have discovered that also 19% of women entrepreneurs do not trade because they have no or very knowledge of how to export. And in South Asia, it's 16%. So other figures that we have gathered in the last 2 years, we have also seen that only 50% of women entrepreneurs receive trainings on trade generally, and only 35% of them on trade regulations and customs procedures. That's again for the three regions combined. And for South Asia specifically, 47% of women entrepreneurs have received trainings on trade generally, and 39% on regulations and customs procedures. However, we see also that despite the current level of knowledge on trade rules, which is not very high, 55% of women entrepreneurs intend to export in the future. The figure in East Africa is even higher, is 94%, and in South Asia it's 75%. So you can see that there is an eagerness, as Bipul was saying, that women want to go on the export market. And altogether, 92% of women entrepreneurs are interested to take trade-related trainings, and in South Asia is 80%. So basically, the data shows that there is room for action. But we didn't stop there. We didn't just stop, interviewing women entrepreneurs, understanding their knowledge gap. We also looked at the different training programs that were existing, let's say, globally and regionally. So we looked at we evaluated about 20 institutions at the international level and regional level. And we found out that there is no really long-standing capacity building programs for women entrepreneurs on trade rules specifically. So, I mean, you have a lot of trainings on, for example, on business management, on marketing, on finance, but not so much on trade rules. And this is why we decided in WTO that we will be launching this program for women entrepreneurs, and we will be doing this year, but I will get to that in a minute. If you could go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So actually, the question is, why is this knowledge so fundamental? So fundamental? Because this is important. Because if we want to use trade as an empowering tool, if you look at, the video showed us all the paperwork that you need to produce in order to be able to export. So you have to also think in terms of so many different items that you need to think about when you want to export. So you must, for example, know how to comply with these complicated border procedures, understand the legal trade jargon as well. Sometimes it's not so easy. You also have to find your way into the maze of various tariffs applied by countries, which are the results of negotiations at the national level, at the regional level, sorry, or at the multilateral level. You have also to recognize and understand numerous non-tariff barriers. You also have to meet technical and phyto and sanitary standards. You also have to understand how and where to access the information on exports, as the videos were showing. You also have to understand and access trade finance, as the videos were showing. So this is a non-exhaustive list, but this is just the, let's say, the trade kind of part of it, the trade rules kind of part of it. You also have another trade aspect, which is also that women entrepreneurs will need to think about. So in addition to the all points I've made, they would need to also research their market, their export market. They would need to implement an export strategy, review their capabilities, because as Bipul was saying, women entrepreneurs have very small companies. They have to construct this export plan. They have to choose their sales presence. They have to promote their products. They have to get paid on time. They have to choose their distribution methods, and so on and so forth. So it's just a whole package that women entrepreneurs need to integrate if they want to have access to international trade and to the opportunities of created by trade. Because actually this is something which is quite interesting to understand. This information is crucial, yes, but the question is also why use trade as an empowering tool? But because it works. It can impact women's business positively. And I'm thinking about the issue of diversification of their activities. It's diversifying their customers, their markets, their products, and opportunities. For example, they have different seasonal opportunities in different countries. That's one aspect of how it could be positively impact the business of women. So, which means that they would be also less reliant on the single domestic market, and that will help them have a more sustainable business. Another aspect also which I want to mention is that knowledge will also help women dispose of the middleman, because often when they do export, when they do trade, they have to have a middleman. And I'm not talking about a middle person, I'm talking about a middleman mostly. So this also will help them being more independent, let's say. And another point which I want to make is that especially for cross-border traders, knowledge is also power, because they have then power over some customs officials that can be biased and that could take advantage of their lack of knowledge on trade rules, and maybe add extra fees to their transactions, for example, without them being aware that this is not the right thing to do. So basically, overall, there is a lack of knowledge, there is a lack of offer in terms of capacity building programs. And now I'm going to go to the next slide, looking at solutions that could be set up to help women integrate international trade. So the first one, I will talk about the program that the WTO wants to set up and launch this year. After those 2 years of talking to women entrepreneurs to understand their needs, to understand how they what they intend to do, how, if they want to export, yes or no, and why. So we have crafted in the WTO this program, which is extremely concrete, with the idea of filling the knowledge and the training offer gaps. So the concept is very, very straightforward. It will be tailor-made to women's entrepreneurs' needs. It will be regionally anchored. It will be a train-the-trainer program. There will be also a lot of support in the implementation of the knowledge. So the idea would be, we're not going to leave women entrepreneurs in the trade jungle. Once we have trained them, we will continue to support them when they would implement their export strategy and they start exporting their products and services. So we will keep their hands all through that process after the training as well. When I say it's going to be tailor-made, that is to say, we want to gather as much information as possible from the women that we want to train on their businesses, on their export strategies, where they want to export, so that the content of the program will be completely tailor-made to what they want to accomplish in terms of export. This is very, very, very important aspect of the program. So it's, as I said, it's going to be very concrete. And the idea also is to be able to, through this program, create some sort of mentoring and monitoring, mentoring and networking platform for women entrepreneurs, because also this is something that we've seen in the surveys we conducted, that there is a lack of access to networks for many reasons, which I won't go into detail. But so this is the concept of the program. I think the program will have also other spillover effects. That is to say, it will enhance women entrepreneurs' capacity in advocacy on trade issues, which I think would be quite crucial. Bipul was talking about e-commerce. Well, for example, in the WTO right now, the members of the organizations are discussing how to regulate transactions over internet. And so these discussions are very important for women entrepreneurs because, as Bipul said, e-commerce is the solution for women entrepreneurs to be able to export. And I've heard that also from women entrepreneurs myself. But then if they don't know what's happening in the WTO, then how could they also somehow advocate and lobby their governments so that they can take their issues into consideration when they negotiate these rules in the WTO. So I think this is very important for them to have this capacity to advocate. It will also reinforce the coordination and the collaboration between businesswomen associations at the national level, at the regional level, and the international level. Actually, this year we're going to also launch this cross-regional network of women entrepreneurs. It's a result of the surveys we conducted with our partners in all the 3 regions which I've mentioned, East Africa, South Asia, and Latin America. So I think this is something which would have a good positive impact on women entrepreneurs. Also, another thing which is very important is that this program will be implemented in partnership with governments. We would of course need the support from them. Also, we want to integrate them as partners in this program because they have a lot of different, let's say, information or initiatives and policies that they've put into place for women entrepreneurs, and often women entrepreneurs don't know about them. So I think this is also that could also be an important added value to the program. If you could go to the next slide, please. So to finish the presentation today, I would like to also highlight other solutions which could also be of interest for women entrepreneurs to integrate international trade. And these solutions are, for example, how governments can integrate a gender aspect when they craft their trade policies and when they implement the different trade agreements that they adopted in the WTO. Looking at the trade facilitation agreement, this is one of the issues at hand today in this webinar. Looking at the trade facilitation agreement, there is one provision in the agreement that says that governments need to digitalize customs procedures. So they need to set up e-customs procedures so that they are easily accessible to all the different entrepreneurs, domestically, but also outside of the country. So this is also obviously something which is very beneficial for women entrepreneurs, because they can, through this process, they can avoid to have face-to-face meetings with customs officials, which can be have a biased opinion about them. There was a survey in one of the countries in South Asia, which looked at how looked at this aspect of how women were treated by customs officials, and they found out that actually they had to wait 30%, 37% longer on average than men to see the same customs official. So already there is some issues there. Also, e-customs procedures is a time saver for women entrepreneurs. They don't have to run to the other side of the town to meet the customs official. They can do it from their home online. It's easy, it's direct, and also it has an impact on the costs of exports for women, because if you have your export permit which is delayed, then that has a cost. It has an implication on the prices of your products, which are then higher, and then it has an implication on the women's entrepreneurs' wages, obviously. So, but I think this is something that I would like to add a point to this aspect, is that that's great. You know, if governments are setting up e-customs procedures, that's wonderful. But you need to understand also that a lot of women entrepreneurs, as Vina was saying, are in the informal sector, and they are not so much savvy in using these new technologies. So, and you know, if you look at the gender digital divide, it's still very wide globally. So this issue is demonstrating how cross-cutting gender issues are. And it's not just because you are setting up e-customs procedure that this will solve women's problems, let's say. It's not enough. If women don't know how to use a computer, or if they don't have access to one. So policies actually need to be inclusive of each other. So that's kind of a point which I wanted to make. And for me, this would have a positive impact. It has a multiplier effect, because, you know, because governments then would need to train women on these new technologies. So that's a win-win when you implement these trade agreements with a gender lens. Another aspect of trade policy is I would like to take a look at, for example, the policies which are set up by governments for small businesses. We know that female-owned firms tend to be smaller than male-owned firms. If we look in South Asia, for example, 44% of women entrepreneurs employ less than 10 people, and 35% between 11 and 30 people. This comes from the surveys we conducted in South Asia, which I've mentioned at the beginning of this presentation. So, and when we look at the global picture, we see that actually 1/3 of the world's small businesses are women-owned. And this is the same thing for developed countries. In Canada, for example, 38% of the self-employed entrepreneurs are women. So therefore, I think that, you know, empowering those small businesses would have a direct impact on women. And actually, if you look at WTO members and the way they've crafted their trade policies, looking at this issue, you can see that about 30% of WTO members have included trade policies supporting women-led companies or small businesses. You know, the trade policies are looking at support on financial support or financial incentives for small businesses and women-led small businesses, for example, facilitating access to credits. They also have incentives helping them access to global value chains or to be more competitive on regional markets. So these set of policies have actually impacted positively women entrepreneurs in the WTO members members countries that these policies were implemented. So, but again, for any gender-related trade policy, information and communication is key. If they don't know about these opportunities and these schemes created by trade policy, then what's the use for them? So again, this communication aspect and information sharing aspect is very important. The last aspect of these section, I would like to talk very, very briefly about these different trade policy tools that the WTO is currently working on. And we are looking again at the trade facilitation agreement. And in the WTO, we're now working on some indicators for governments to help them integrate gender into their trade facilitation policies. So it's kind of a big, huge mapping out exercise, which has a method of 5 different steps. I'm not going to go too much into detail, but basically the idea is for this tool to be available by the summer 2021. And once the tool on trade facilitation will be finalized, we will also extend this method to other WTO agreements. If we could go to the next slide, please. So in terms of conclusions, it's very simple. As I said, building trade capacity for women entrepreneurs is a key element to help them integrate the global market. But here I would like to, as I said, there is a lot of room for action. But here I want to make I want to focus on one aspect, is that the room for action is great, but actually action should be concrete, grounded into the reality of women entrepreneurs and traders. Otherwise, the use of what we can do is very much diminished. And lastly, I would like to also say that we are going to in the WTO, we're going to a new phase of activities and actions on trade and gender. And we are starting to implement the new action plan on trade and gender. It's an action plan which will go until 2026. So it's a 5-year action plan. And actually we're putting this capacity building at the center of this strategy. So hopefully we will have some results to share in a couple of years or something like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you, Anoush. So let me now turn to Jahnabi. I have 1 or 2 points to make for you, Jahnabi. But before that, just one reaction to Anoush's presentation. That one thing is very clear, that it has to be a partnership, a collaboration between government and private sector. Yeah, it can't just be government-led. So as we see, we are very good in having policies in place, but there is a limit to what government can do. So the implementation always remains a challenge. So with the mantra of minimum government, maximum governance, we have to involve more and more private sector, including civil society organizations, in order to address many of these challenges. So I'm glad that WTO is taken up. We know that WTO is a member-driven organization, so it has to go through the government. But I would urge you, Anoush, to involve private sector, to involve civil society organizations, community-based organizations, women entrepreneurs directly to implement the program. So on that note, Jahnabi, you have heard this presentation. So yes. Let me And I know that you are an entrepreneur. You have your own business, particularly on tea, on tourism, and more importantly, you are also leading a large network of women entrepreneurs, small as well as big. Uh, so, what is your experience? Experience. We know the problems. We know somehow we know the solutions, but when it comes to implementation, there is this challenge. So, how should we overcome this challenge? That is something which we are very keen to know from you. Over to you, Jahnabi. You have about 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Well, thank you, Bipul, for making this possible to be here to discuss and deliberate on mainstreaming shepreneurs in international trade. It was a very interesting learning from WTO, Anoush. And I would like to say that as an entrepreneur myself and as representative of the Women's Chamber in India called FLOW, the Women's Wing of FICCI, let me just go through some of the points I thought I should bring up here. So we know that the changing global economy is now offering new opportunities for women through services, through global value chains, and the digital technology that you spoke about. Today, more than 2/3 of women in the developed countries, they were employed in the services sector. In 2017, up from 45% in 1991. And in developing countries, the proportion of women in the services sector went up to 38% from 25% in that same period. Countries are getting more integrated with the global value chains, which is to create jobs and increase wages for women. The global value chains tend to have positive indirect benefits for all aspects of women's livelihoods, such as education, digital technology, the new online platform. They all create opportunities for women to bypass the traditional trade barriers, expand the entrepreneurial skills, develop flexible careers that enable them to manage both work and household responsibilities. But for women to reap these rewards, countries, all countries, and ours included, they need to adopt more reforms in the trade policy to reduce that discrimination against women while building the human capital that women represent. And despite all these advances, women across the world still hold the fewer jobs, still paid less, still likely to experience worse job conditions than men. Among fewer than 1 in 2 women work. Among those who do work, 80% women occupy medium and low-ended jobs, low-skilled jobs. And they're overrepresented in the informal sector, which of course WTO has already spoken about. And just 3 of female employees in low-income countries cannot qualify as skilled workers. So it's a trade policy, coming back to that. Against women, it's resulting in lower levels of employment and higher prices for consumer goods. So targeted policies in trade can help women maximize the benefits of trade. So when we talk about the trade barriers, we need to have them which impede women's access to international markets, to improve women's access to education, financial services, and digital technology. I've seen it coming in as the FLOW president last year. We at FLOW have tried to work on the connecting women, and we find even women in our level that they need so much of knowledge inputs. When we are talking about e-commerce, and that's what Anoush has spoken about, knowledge is power. We try to bring in the government e-marketplace, like your video had showed, to connect our women. So the onboarding opportunities that the government of India is giving, for instance, 3% of services and goods for women, those two we've had to be able to empower and enlighten our women about. So there's so much of opportunities out there, but the connection between the two has to be made. But coming back to what we were talking about, trade, that now everything has been looked through the gender lens. We know that increasing women's labor force participation in India, for instance, can go up by 10 percentage points and add $770 billion to India's GDP by 2025. And this path of achieving gender equity can only come if we have different approaches to this, to the trade policies in hand. there is a need to recognize that decision-making must take the gender lens into focus every time. So the gender-sensitive approach to trade is essential. And we think, so the development of gender mainstreaming is important, sectoral policies, a gender review of all phases and products of work, a gender balance in decision-making positions. We need a targeted intervention to reduce gender inequalities, equal participation of women required, monitoring by women's organizations, and accountability. We need equal employment opportunities. There should be access to basic services, such as health and education, and access to resources, such as land, credit, and business services, as well as the technical assistance that Anoush has spoken about, that knowledge is power, that targeted training in education. So coming back to our work in Flow, we've seen that working in the Flow mentorship cell has been amazing, that there's so many women who need to be mentored, who are interested in taking it forward, and who've achieved a certain level themselves, who want to mentor other women along. So mentorship is a very key component to women's development on the whole. So right now in India, we are 49% women in our 1.3 billion population, but only 14% of businesses are run by female entrepreneurs. That is only 8.05 million out of a total of 58.5 million entrepreneurs are women. And the global average of women's workforce participation is 48%, as against India's 27%. And it is a fact now that the avenues like e-commerce will help bridge this gap. And this will add that $700 billion to our economy to make women an inseparable part of our government's 5 trillion goal policy. So we think that what the country needs now more than ever before is that we look at focusing on the gender differences, and our government is taking a lot of cognizance on that. So gender differences in laws, that globally 2.7 billion women are restricted from having the same choice of jobs as men. The women remain less likely to participate in the labor force than men. Women are more likely to be unemployed than men. Women are overrepresented in informal and the vulnerable employment, and globally paid less, as I've spoken before. And the fact that the social systems around which a woman's participation is built, violence and harassment in the world of work, which affects women. So I must mention here with the new budget that our government has taken cognizance about women's working conditions. But coming back to what we are trying to do at Flow, is for the e-commerce site. When we signed an MOU with the National Skills Development Corporation, they gave us free access to learning resources and digital skilling awareness drives, providing this generation of women with trade opportunity knowledge, with the life skills to survive in the digital economy through that eSkill India and through NSDC, other digital initiatives. So we've seen a growing sort of rise of homepreneurs in urban and semi-urban India. So this is the idea of that minimum investment and maximum profit in e-commerce has been a boon for our women, and thousands have taken to this e-commerce site and actually bringing home the bacon and being able to play an equal role. So, and this has given women the flexibility and to avoid what Anoush has spoken about, the trade difficulties of having to interface the men at the trade borders. Everything would happen. The opportunities are now lying on the online space. And this way we've mitigated the gender barrier. Women get their flexi home time, and they're being able to have this direct interface with the seller and cut out the middleman. So with India, with being second largest internet user in the world, with over 600 million internet users, India is poised for a great leap forward. And like I'd mentioned, GEM opportunity has given us for women, not only for women in the services goods, but they're also looking at women at the grassroots. They're also looking at onboarding the artisan levels. And we at Flow are trying to make that possible. During the pandemic, when there were millions of artisans, which was the second largest employer in the country after agriculture, where women are concerned, this sector has shown a lot of resilience in being able to, they've equipped their skills. We've tried to connect them to an online platform called Creative Dignity, where they learned how to photograph their wares, put it on the net. So the next level is we're trying to get them onto the GEM platform. And here also the government is taking cognizance and trying to help this connection. So on all levels in our country, this is happening. It's a long way forward, but these are the beginnings. And we'd like to say what we've done at Flow in the village adoption program as well, where too the women are taking on the online skills, getting trained digitally while being at home. So, and being able to empower themselves and survive within their own ecosystem. So that's the other trade that they're doing in the very informal sector. Like you've said, each women have very small companies in the country, but now with that one person company that the government is mandating, it's very good news for the women, Indian women here. And we'd like to also lastly talk about what I've been doing in Flow. This last year, we brought up the worldwide consultation with women's bodies on trade possibilities. It went off, it had received a great response, and we called it the Women of 7 Regions, or the W7 Initiative, in which we are trying to create a worldwide forum for the exchange of information, experience, visibility, and connectivity among women business owners. We're trying to set the stage for new opportunities and joint ventures among women entrepreneurs and business leaders. So far, we've met with and had roundtable discussions with Myanmar, Netherlands, Vietnam, Chile, and Ireland, with the support and cooperation of the ambassadors of all the countries. And the next step will be the MOU and connecting our women at Flow on a B2B level with sectoral interest to match the women of those countries. And our next phase is taking place now. So I think in these ways, with that mainstreaming of the shepreneur is also our bit, what we are trying to do. I can only speak for the organization that I represent now, and see that those are the ways we are taking it forward. And we think what WTO has spoken about, the training program for women could not come at a better time, because Indian women are poised for the new leap at different levels. And I'm sure we would all find a place in this new world. Thank you.
Thank you, Jahnabi, for telling us of all these positive developments, not just challenges, which are taking place through FLO and various other initiatives that you talked about. Now, let me come to Mia, but before I do that, I just want to flag one point. That now we are talking about post-COVID recovery. Now, my point is, how can you make it more balanced, more resilient, more sustainable? And we cannot do it unless we address all these challenges, all these sources of inequalities that 50% of our society, of our humanity are facing. At the same time, the positive story which has come out from Jahnavi's presentation is that as we are becoming more and more digital, if we can bridge the gender divide in the traditional sense as well as in digital sense, things are going to move in a positive direction. The challenge before us is how can we leapfrog that. So on that point, I'm sure that Jahnabi must have made FLO's presentation to the Commerce Ministry as we are going to come out with our new trade policy. And this is something, mainstreaming gender in our trade policy. I'm sure that it must be there in your agenda. Now, coming to you, Mia, you have seen this presentation, you have heard Jahnabi, you have seen our videos. I know that you have been working in the whole Asia Pacific region. You have varied experience from Vanuatu to Bhutan. Now, one point which is striking me is that, and this is from our literature review, that women entrepreneurs in Southeast Asia, in Pacific Islands, they are doing relatively better as compared to South Asia. So my question to you to begin with is, what are the reasons and how South Asia and Southeast Asia, the Pacific Islands, how women entrepreneurs can come together, uh, not just to develop their capacity, but to do more trade, but actually to do more trade with each other. So over to you, Mia, in about 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Bipul. I'm not sure I can actually answer very directly your question, because we haven't done a comparative study between the performance of women entrepreneurs between the sub-regions in Asia Pacific, but I can speak about the factors that we have found working for business entrepreneurs and against them in various contexts. And before doing that, let me first thank you for giving me opportunity to talk in this forum. Of course, I am a very recently retired director of Trade Investment and Innovation Division of ESCAP since Monday. And I'm speaking now as an advisor at large of ARTNeT, which is Asia Pacific Research and Training Network on trade, and also as a advocate of women's influencing role in policy making and as well in private sector. Let me start, and let me also thank my fellow Anoush and fellow panelist Jahnabi for excellent, very comprehensive presentations. It is very little I can add in a contextual sense, but maybe, you know, because I strongly believe that a repetition is mother of learning, then maybe just repeating some of these things that were said, maybe we can, you know, strengthen the message from and takeaways from this panel that need to be heard by different stakeholders, governments in particular, but also private sector, civil society, and other social networks that we have. And so I think I have 4 points that I want to comment on, Bipul, and hopefully I can sort of get the elements to your questions as well. These points are the following. Very quick comments on the general trade policy design and making. And then focusing on really the a sort of a more focused area of practicing the role of trade in the business of export and import and trade, if you wish, and really looking at the role of the government in that context, in collaboration with the business association or business representatives, and how we can enhance this mutual beneficial sharing of knowledge and information, etc. And then a few words only in the end on what we have been doing in ESCAP in a context of removing some of these obstacles to the women's entrepreneurs, whether that's really directly related to tradable sector or not. It doesn't really matter, because enhancing the capacity of women to be active as entrepreneurs, nilly-willy, given the context of globalized economy, will also enhance their ability to really engage in trade across the borders. So let me just, you know, based on what was said, say what are the problems with trade policy making, and I think based on what was said here, I really welcome Anoush's announcement that there will be a new working program or work program on trade and gender. I think this is in relation to the establishment on the informal group on women and trade, and it would be good if that document can be shared, Anoush, so that you know, people that are active in that area also may have some information on that. And I hope that this covers really a sort of a thinking out of the box and how we can nudge the governments to think differently about really delivering the benefits of trade for women, looking at the activities of women in the economies. As it was said, in many countries, the women are actually half of population. But when you look at how much they accounted for in commanding the businesses or contributing directly to tradable activities, it is always much less. And the question then is why? The reason for that is that the environment for women to engage in directly, in businesses are not made with thinking of the benefits for women to engage in that. And because, as it was said, main decision makers still are men, and therefore they start looking at the rules and looking at the policy instruments and mechanisms, etc., from their own perspective, and do not take advice in terms of how to feminize those policies. I think it is very important to look at to position trade policy to be gender transformative policies, and to really take into account the elements of accountability with implementation of such trade policies. Why we don't have that is because we can't actually measure anything. The impact that trade policies have on women specifically are not measurable at present. And they are not measurable because we don't have data. And we don't have data because the way how data is collected, again, was set without the interest to collect the data that is gender differentiated. Right? So the whole mindset needs to be changed. Of course, investment will need to be made into allowing different data collection, and from there we will have much better transparency and therefore accountability of the policymakers when it comes to what impact trade and other policies that have gender differentiated impacts really deliver. And that comes not only through the unilateral trade policies, but in particular through trade agreements or free trade agreements, right? We have grown to accept that in the process of ratification of free trade agreements, there will be certain requests to demonstrate what are the impacts on environment, for example, of the trade measures that will be taken through the agreements. In some cases, even in the context of labor standards or labor, but not gender or not women specifically, right? And of course, it is more difficult to do a very specific and exact quantitative analysis of such impacts, but it is not impossible. And there are countries like Canada or some others that have actually employed resources to improve their quantitative study of impacts of not only general trend in trade policies or other policies like fiscal, etc., but in particular regional trade agreements. So that can be taken to heart. And that once that is changed, then of course in the new environment of how we set trade policy and how we allow that the trade policy is, that we change the way we do trade policy, then we will have the change also how do we do business. So let me now turn very quickly, because I'm aware of the time flow, to the issue of women in business and in trade in specific. And I would like to draw your attention to an article that appeared in I think in the Financial Times in September 21 by Linda Scott, and it was titled, "It is Time to End the Male Monopoly in International Trade." And this is a fantastic, very short article in which she demonstrates that how in 21st century, at the verge of entering into third decade of the 21st century, the trade business, the business of export and import, the business of trade facilitation in particular, is still male dominated. And it's male dominated because of so many factors that have been already explained very well by Anoush and Jahnabi. In terms of, why don't we have women entrepreneurs, why their business is small, why they have obstacle in directly dealing with business challenges, having lack in capacity, not only in terms of business models, financial literacy, computer literacy, trade rules literacy, standard literacy, understanding this complexity. I was amazed looking at the videos and looking at how many actually steps one has to take to register the business, to make it legal, to submit the documents, which documents and how, the amount of transaction costs involved in that, keeping in mind that women at the same time, and this is particularly relevant now for you, Bipul, because you're asking about your region, where women are still actually predominantly responsible for taking care of the household, education of children, taking care of elderly, etc., etc. The time that they need to invest in keeping with the red tape to engage in business, whether it is national or across the border, is enormous. And so then the recommendation for them to actually use middlemen is not helpful, because it is making them again dependent on someone in the middle that will reduce their profits and income and actually reduce their knowledge to handle the challenges, right? So the solution to that is to simplify the rules. The solution to that is to make them actually accessible to women with the knowledge that they have and with the time that they have, and to use the digital technology as much as possible for the simplification, not to only say, okay, now we have digital technology and therefore you can fill in multiple steps because you are doing it by clicking the buttons. It's not that, right? You still need to one click to do that, to be able to say that you have done smart changes in that context. So I think I think all of the stuff that Jahnabi was saying will be very, very useful for women to engage. Networking, mentors, information, market intelligence, but financing is the most important. And so here I want to finish with two things. One is to say that ESCAP has been directly involved through the project that we have funded by Canada on catalyzing women's entrepreneurships to actually strengthen the access to financing in the pilot countries that we are working with for business entrepreneurs. It is not necessarily for business in export, but as I said, it can open the door for exporting as well. And so we are working with access to financing through the various fintech modalities. We are working through direct funding, through grants to the businesses. We are working with partners to enhance the issuance of women's bond, so that we enhance also the ability of the local environment to fund these businesses. And we have had already 7,000 plus women actually being benefited by accessing various sort of improved financing in their work, which I'm very proud. We are very, very proud of. We are also working directly with all of these in providing mentoring services and in providing the training in using digital technology in terms of upgrading women's skills to deal with digital technology in their work. And one other thing, very often women are found lacking access to finance because they don't have assets. They don't have collaterals. In this article that Linda said, I love this one. She says 80% of the world's surface is owned by men. So what that says is that men own title on 80% of whatever actually can be used as collaterals in the traditional banking. And that's why women cannot rely on the traditional banking to get the loans and the financing. What we have succeeded in doing is working with various digital companies, including the digital payments like Visa, MasterCard, etc., to help women collect the data on their transactions in doing business and to transfer that information on the volume of business they do into the asset, into the digital asset that they can actually use in going to the bank and saying, look, this is the volume of business I have. This is my clientele. This is how I work. And this is sufficient or more valuable than me having a title on this little house for you to lend me more money to enhance my business. So using the digital technology in creation of digital assets that women can then use in their business is very, very valuable. And I'm surprised, Bipul, because this opportunities exist in South Asia as well. And we have had great success in Bangladesh in that context, as we did in Samoa or Vietnam. And so I think it is maybe because of the sheer number of people, where the successful stories do not come completely at the surface, maybe in India, as they do in a smaller country like in Pacific or in Southeast Asia. But I know of very many successful stories from your part. And I think the key, and this is where I'm going to repeat my speakers in my last sentence, the key is really in changing the mindset of what we want to achieve. And to be honest with that, I mean, I would love to be in a panel that talks about the woman entrepreneurship and woman position in business, where men are actually speaking, not moderating, but speaking. Because why do we always assume that women have to speak on that? I think the men need to take the ownership over changing the rules of the game. And since they have been making these rules of the game for so long, they need to actually engage very actively in changing them. So let me stop there, and I apologize for my co-panelists for taking more time perhaps than necessary in saying.
No, not at all, Mia. Thank you very much. Not at all, Mia. Thank you very much for placing all these thoughts on the table. I'm going to emphasize one or 2 points that since 1990, it's more than 30 years now, CUTS has been working on women's empowerment, particularly women's economic empowerment. Very good work at the grassroots in Rajasthan state in particular. And the first thing, which we have realized is that in order to talk about not doing things, talk about women's empowerment, particularly economic empowerment, the first thing that we need to do, and that was the first lesson that we had, is that we have to sensitize.
Comment which you made that you went back to 30 years and picked up some of the things which have not been done.
Sorry, Jahnabi. Anyway, so the point which I was making, that the first lesson that we learned, that in order to talk about women's empowerment, particularly women's economic empowerment, the first thing that we need to do is to sensitize the men folk of the society. And that's something which we have been doing in various activities of ours. So thank you, Mia, for all these thoughts. Particularly, I'm just going to flag one of them or underline one of them, that there are positive stories, positive examples which are coming out, particularly in respect to access to finance. The examples that you have given from Bangladesh, from Vietnam, countries like from those countries. And it is indeed a challenge to replicate, given the size, given the challenges, scale, the same model in India. Perhaps what we can think of, and this is something which we are very keen to talk to ESCAP, is to have such programs in specific regions of India, particularly Northeast India. And there are many similarities with parts of Bangladesh in Northeast India. And that is something which going forward, we are going to take it up, and we need to talk to UNESCAP, Government of India, to take it forward. So on that note, let me now turn to Jahnabi, Nandita. Nandita, you have heard all of them, and I'm sure that you have made note of some points, if not all. Now, given the fact that you have been working on gender mainstreaming for a long time, more from sociological and social anthropological angle, not just economic angle. So what is your take about gender mainstreaming? And you have worked in India, you have worked in Nepal, Bangladesh, many other countries. So what is your take on gender mainstreaming, particularly in respect to entrepreneurship development? So over to you, Nandita.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Guts, for giving me this opportunity. And thank you, Veena, and thank you, Bipul. Veena, for the excellent videos that your unit has created that we saw, which is, I think, very important. So I'm going to take the point which Mia said, why don't we have men in this panel? Let me begin by giving just a few figures. 2021 data for the top 10 richest men. Jeff Bezos, we all know, asset 192.3 billion. Elon Musk, 182.9 billion. Bill Gates, 121.56. Arnold, 148 point something. And the 10th is Mr. Mukesh Ambani, 80.9 or 80.10 billion. Compare that to 2021 data for the top 10 business women entrepreneurs in the world. Even the first one's total asset doesn't come anywhere close to the last one's in the man. So it's Georgina Hope Reinhardt. She's a mining magnate from Australia. Her net asset worth is 17.4 billion. Oprah at 3.2, 3.5 billion. Oprah, we all know, Oprah Winfrey. Cher Wong, who is the co-founder of HTC and Biotech, is about 1.67 billion, right? Now, an inherent handicap. This figure is not just a figure. These figures indicate the years of control and access over resources, knowledge, technology that men have had, and women have a long way to climb to reach anywhere close to that. That's not to say that that's not happening. 2017, Bipul, you're aware, we brought out this. Yeah, we brought this book, we did this research, Asia Foundation did. It said, expanding the benefits of trade to women in the BBIN region, a program design primer. I think, Anoush, you quoted from one of that, 38% more waiting time for women compared to men in customs. This was 2017, today we are in 2021. And I kind of, was trying to recollect what we were saying then and where have we moved from 17 to 21. The challenges remain, but opportunities have increased. And that's an interesting thing. Even between 17 and 21, what Jahnabi was saying, the massive scale up on access to digital areas, digital platforms for trade, for any kind of economic activity, for enterprise development, for skills training, for information is exponential. It's been an exponential increase in the last 10 years, right? So obviously it's way higher as we are sitting here today, 2021. We fast-tracked the digital journey because of COVID, because a lot of us were forced to go digital in everything that we were not doing digitally. Interestingly, it also created opportunities. And I like the term which you're using, Jahnabi, homepreneurs. Women who were probably just doing small things, who then said, wait a minute, I am a great baker. I need to start baking, and I could actually use this time when people are not going to restaurants or not going out to market my products. And I can tell you, in Delhi, in the area where I stay, it's a small colony. There used to be 2 female bakers. Now there are 10 of them. Okay, so there has been this, and there's also an acceptance that's now happening. Is this going to sustain? Is something that we need to ask ourselves. Okay, how are we going to make some gains that have happened sustain? Secondly, how are we going to make up for the gains that were lost because of COVID? Let's also not forget, today we are at a juncture in the economic growth globally where we have had massive breakdown of economic systems. We have had a massive downflow. And so we've had governments throw stimulus packages after stimulus packages at us. I just want to take a step back and say, can we just analyze those stimulus packages from a gender lens? Is there enough in those to support those women who would have fallen off the track during this period because of both the inherent handicap and the handicap caused by the pandemic, which was gendered? Do we have the economic stimulus packages, which is for explicitly focusing on saying, if you set up an enterprise with 50% more women, you might get a certain kind of a tax rebate. If it's a women-led enterprise, there may be a better advantage for you in terms of accessing loans, trainings, trade markets. And this is something I was talking to my colleagues in Asia Foundation today from Bangladesh, Nepal, and Pakistan. And all our countries are going to have to look at this when we are talking about increasing women's footprint in international trade. But to do that, we also have to say, where are they in the internal home trade section? Where are they in the economy in our own countries before they move to that international arena? There are a lot of women who are probably doing great in the international arena who would have taken a big hit because of the COVID. How is that going to be taken care of going forward? Now, I think when we did this research in 2017, we talked about 4 areas. And Bipul, and Veena, you're probably aware, because we discussed this at length with you guys. One was an infrastructure gap. At that time, when we talked infrastructure, we were also looking at roads, connectivity. We're looking at about improving access to electricity, water, everything that women need for enterprise. And who has maximum access to these raw material, as you would call it, or hardcore infrastructure at a given time and space. To that infrastructure today, I would also like to add access to technology-driven, IT-driven, internet-driven infrastructure. All the digital infrastructure that is needed for women to make real use and real good use of this growing, growth in the digital area. We talked about capacity gaps, and I think those everybody has talked about, so I'm not going to talk about it. But one thing is also very clear. We have to break up how we are going to address capacity gaps, right from the point of the primary producer of a particular good to the secondary buyer to the final exporter. There is a chain, there's a value chain out there which needs to be addressed across the sector. Not every small MSME or SME person in, say, Rajasthan is going to become an exporter, but her goods can be exported by other women intermediaries who can be the next entrepreneur. So that value chain absolutely on capacity needs to be broken down, and it has to be addressed at pre-border, at the border, and post the border. So if you're looking at it as as an international trajectory, you have to look at it from that perspective. The knowledge gap beyond the economic, cultural, information barrier, today we are at the point where I think technology barrier can become big unless we address it full on and make sure that all women who need to be a part of the economic value chain have that technological knowledge, information, and the accessories needed, even if it's something like a smartphone or a phone in which they can do trade. Support gap, that's the policy point. The support gap, I think it's both government support, the non-governmental, Vipul, as you were saying in the beginning. It's a multi-sectoral support that will have to be there. There are issues about how complicated the forms are, whether the forms are available in multiple languages in India. There's no point having it just in Hindi or English in a country like India, or in any country. You need to be able to have that. Information about the countries that you're going to export to, is that easily available? Where is the supply and demand networking support that we can provide to women? And I think that's critical. And I think, to me, what was very interesting in the recent budget that was announced, and that's again a very important factor to keep in mind when we talk about greater share of women in international trade, is also redefining labor, at least for South Asia and India, definitely. We need to redefine what we called traditionally formal labor force versus informal labor force, because there is this big growing sector of the digital labor force, the platform and the gig worker or the gig economy. I think it's a big disservice to call them informal. And the fact that this finance minister and in the recent budget has actually provided social security and has come out with that as a recommendation for the gig worker somehow is going to help us redefine this new area of labor, which probably we didn't think about 20 years ago, that there is going to be a labor force which is going to be in this space of the absolutely formal labor force in a structure versus the completely informal labor force, which is, you know, partially employed or employed in certain spaces which are completely non-structural, to this sector which has got a structure, which is a digital structure, but it is a structure. There is a company, which is a company. It's virtual, but it's a company, and there are people who are being employed or taken on as labor, contractual people under this structure. So how do you define this? Because if we don't today redefine what we term as labor, I think even getting a voice on the table from the gender perspective, you know, on this new emerging market is going to be difficult. It's really going to be hard because we lose out that voice. So I think, to me, it's going to be critical, Bipul, to say that, taking into account everything that the other three speakers have so eloquently put before me, is to really start focusing on what I think Jahnabi was saying. There's this new age economy. There is also a divide between rural entrepreneurs and urban entrepreneurs, and that divide needs to be connected. There is also an access divide between rural, semi-urban, tier 2, tier 3 entrepreneurs and markets they access. You know, is it the border huts we are talking about? Are we therefore going to take affirmative action and say 50% of shops or licenses in the border hut would be women? And then what are we going to do to make sure that that happens? Not just put a number on a quota, but what are you going to do to make it happen? Those need to be unpacked systematically and consciously by everybody. I mean, by us as development partners, by governments, by chambers of commerces, and so on and so forth. And I think a lot's been done. I will admit that we are really thinking about a whole lot of these issues. You know, we are coming to solutions. My only concern would be to keep on top of this movement with that gender lens constantly focused and not lose sight where the divide between the highest earning women entrepreneur and the lowest earning male entrepreneur in the world is not so big. You know, so there is not the divide between an 81.8 billion versus just a 17.4 billion, which is not fair game, honestly. And I think that's where we need to start plugging the figures to further reduce this and create the space for more women to enter at the different level of the value chain of international trade. Lastly, South Asia itself is a very, very poorly trade connected region. We all know about it. The Brookings report, which came out last year, I think, talks about the differential between how much India is trading within South Asia versus our northern neighbor, China. And the differential is worth noting. And I think women can fill that differential. If we allow women to trade in the region much more conducively, that differential, I am confident, can be very well met. So I think let's look at how we can collaborate to move this forward. And I think at the foundation, we are very clear that it's, we work on a various sector, but economic enterprise and economic empowerment of women is critical to our thinking, not just here, but in all the 18 country offices where we operate. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nandita. I think this webinar, essentially what it has done, it has given us a lot of food for thought. In fact, if I list them down, I'm not going to do that. No, we have recorded and we have also taken notes, and ultimately very soon we are going to list them down, all these ideas. Then this can actually lead us to a very comprehensive work program over a period of time. Now I'll just take one or two examples. For example, Nandita has spoken about women in value chains. That's very important. She has also emphasized or underlined the need for looking at policies from a gender lens. Nothing is gender neutral in whatever sense you can look at it. Yeah. Even data is not gender neutral. Data collection is not gender neutral. So you need to first recognize all this, imbibe them, and then see to it that actions are taken. Anoush has spoken about, laid out that how this access to information can be bridged. Then Mia has talked about a number of examples, initiatives which are happening in our part of the world. I'm talking about the Asia Pacific part of the world. Now, one idea which is coming to my mind is not just from Mia's presentation, but overall, is that if we can discuss, and in some cases have, carbon tax on the border, why can't we have gender subsidy at the border as a market access opportunity? Nothing else. I'm not talking about, or rather looking at it, trade and gender linkages from a sanctions-based approach or angle. I know that if I do that, some countries, some missions in Geneva, they're going to have a knee-jerk reaction. I'm not going to take their names. Then Jahnabi also talked about the number of initiatives, even during COVID period or as a result of COVID as well, that have been taken, and how good they are in terms of their impact. Already they are having some impact. So how can we leapfrog? And one common thread of all that you have said is that we have to look at many of these things, or if not all of them, from not just from gender lens, but also from a digital lens. We cannot ignore that. So bridging digital divide from a gender lens is very, very critical. And how do we do it? And that's something which we need to, I mean, of course, several initiatives are being taken in all countries to do that, but how can we leapfrog that? That's something that we have to seriously think about. So on that note, before I close this session, let's go back to our panelists for their final thoughts in 1 or 2 minutes.
Just maybe before, I like the idea of leapfrogging. So this is, I think this is time for this. And this is also what I think a majority of WTO members want to do. This issue is very important for them. And as part of the new structure that they have set up in the WTO, they are, I think, going to, and I hope going to leapfrog on this issue. So we will see probably a result of that at the WTO Ministerial Conference, which is going to happen, I think this year, should be, possibly at the end of this year. There's no date yet, but I think you'll be the result of that at that time. Thank you.
Thank you, Anoush. Just another idea for you to make note of. You don't have to respond to this at the moment. Is it possible for the WTO Secretariat, particularly your macroeconomic division, to come out with a new database, maybe at HS6 or HS8 digit level, where women traders or women entrepreneurs, women workers are predominantly involved in the production of those products, of those commodities. And then some countries may place, to begin with, a non-paper, then a proposal that let's have 0 for 0 for those products. I know that it's quite a task. It's not going to happen in a year. Of course, we can start. And keeping in mind that let's achieve this by the end of this decade. So these are the kind of positive agenda that we are talking about. So thank you, Anoush, for your remarks. Nandita, you have any final comment?
I think, I mean, in agreement with my fellow speakers, and I think, as Anoush said, that, how do we look at strategies that can help us leapfrog further? Definitely the digital divide is one, and then a segregated strategy for accessing across different economic and geographic category of women will be very important. It's not a linear group that we are looking at. So I think we have to be mindful of that.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So we are going to come out with a report of this program other than the recording, of course. And we're going to, a very brief report, not more than few pages, with action agenda, action points, action plan, and send that to you. And we'll be grateful for your feedback or reaction to that action plan. Now, I'll end by saying just one thing other than thanking all of you. I was looking at the number of participants of this webinar. There are few participants who are looking at it over YouTube, but in this Zoom platform, the maximum number was 70. And I was looking at every minute how many of them are present, are present. And then I've done a very rough 5-minute moving average. And the good thing is that it is more or less a good, perfect, normal distribution that we can see with very little skewness or kurtosis. So that's a success of this webinar, and it is because of the speakers and of course the videos that we have produced. So on that positive note, let me thank you once again, and I can assure you that we are going to be in touch with you as we take forward our work on gender and trade. Thank you.